Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Church History That Liberates. I'm Megan Rohrer, and I have with me.
Susan Strouse.
Welcome back. Church History That Liberates is a conversation about a random and sometimes far-fetched fact that I find in early church history that is for the purpose of people who want to be able to talk about the fact that there were progressive and diverse things happening in early Christianity for that moment when someone says, they never did it that way before, so you can't be that way now. And then you can know this fun fact from history and make people feel uncomfortable at parties.
There's a good mission statement.
Or it's just a fun thing to learn about so that you don't replicate some of those things. And so today, I thought, in light of some of the things happening in our political world here in the United States, we talk a little bit about early church, Jewish, and Christian understandings about blood and how those early understandings of blood has led to putting down people of different genders and anti-Semitism. So how those two things are linked. So if you notice in political conversations that people are against queer people and Jewish people in the same breath, this is where some of those ideas linked. And it comes from a book, Susan. It's very long if you want to go and read it all, or I can give you the 5-minute version of what I think is in the book. And then those who want to learn more can read about it. So this is a book called Blood and Belief, the circulation of a symbol between Jews and Christians.
Circulation, that's good. Was that on purpose? Circulation of?
Yeah, I think it is.
Just asking.
They're very smart. Yeah, this is by David Bile. At least I think that's how it's pronounced.
Okay.
And so this book is sort of chronicling how do the Nazis come up with this idea that Jewish people should be rid of the earth? How does it come out of Christianity? And it begins sort of with the understanding in the Jewish community about what blood is and what the relationship to blood is. And many people think about the temple in Israel and Jerusalem as a place where you were to do animal sacrifices, right? A lot of the ideas prior to Christianity, a lot of people believe people just wanted to have animal sacrifices. Well, what is argued in this book is that the relationship with blood was more about this idea that blood was a liminal space, that it was a place of sort of fluidity in between life and death, right? In the ancient Hebrew understanding of what life was, many of us remember that you have to have the breath of life, but you also have to have the blood of life. And so those were supposed to be the two ingredients in what the sacred elements of life was. Blood in Hebrew is dam, breath is ruah, adam, right? So blood and breath, which is why when Jesus comes back from the dead, he has them touch the wounds where the blood is, and then he breathes on them, right? So Jesus is demonstrating the two ways that you know someone is alive. So the other thing that was really important kind of to Jewish understanding of blood in this kind of early Christianity time is a story in the book of Exodus, because we're talking about Moses. Exodus 19, and it talks about a way that Moses baptizes people. Do you remember this story? He throws blood on them, right? And so they are included in this covenant of blood in the bloodline of God. They're the people of God because Moses throws blood on them. So remembering this language, is there anything you ever say on Sundays that talks about a covenant of blood?
Oh, gee. Could it be, this is the new covenant sealed with my blood?
Yeah. So those words actually come from Moses. And this idea of what a rabbi would do I spent some time in Capernaum, Israel, the place where Jesus is thought to have worked in a synagogue, right? And I was there with a rabbi, Rabbi Denise Engler, and she talked about how during Jesus's day, Jesus didn't do like what a pastor does. Like every Sunday, you do a ritual, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a worship
Yeah.
service,
Yeah.
and through that worship service, you have sort of all of your prayers. And so people are coming to the sacred place to have their prayers and do their main rituals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In Jesus's day, you did all that in Jerusalem. You did
Right.
all of that at the temple.
Right.
And so the local temples were places of building community, of support for each other, of building people up in faith, of like if you have questions about what Bible study is, a little bit of that, all the stuff that we read about Jesus doing, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't have like lots of stories of. And then Jesus went to the altar and performed the ritual, right?
No. Mm-mm. Right.
And so early Christianity, a lot more laid back, a lot less about a Sunday service or about all those smells and bells that a lot of people
Oh yeah. Right.
associate with Christianity. Do you know the
But
year?
surely they had pews and all of that,
Yeah,
right? And
pews made
acolytes.
of stone, and they each had their name carved in their own spot, right?
That's right. That's right.
Do you know what year it was when communion finally becomes kind of this central important element in
Hmm.
the Christian church?
I do
If you had
not.
to guess.
If I had to guess, um, 60 CE.
Wrong.
Of course.
1215.
Oh man.
1215. That's way later than you'd have thought, right?
Well, yeah, because I would have thought that because Paul talked about it.
Yeah, it was so, but that was celebrated within meals. They're eating food
Right. Right.
together.
Right.
They're
Right.
having
Right.
picnics, right?
Right.
They're
That's right.
having community gatherings around food,
Right.
but
Not
communion gets elevated up to a sacrament
okay.
in
Yeah.
1215, and that's
Okay.
when it begins to have really dogmatic rules about when and how you can do it and who can have
Yeah.
it and how they can touch it.
Uh huh. Yeah.
Because
Okay.
in the early days of early Christianity,
Mm.
being associated with blood was something early Christians got made fun of for. Not because of communion, though. They used to be called the worst insult in all of Jewish tradition or in Jewish
Mm.
curses.
Mm-hmm.
They were called essentially the children of a mother who menstruates.
Oh.
Because if Mary is a virgin,
Yeah.
they believed, this is not me, Megan Rohrer, believing
Yeah.
this is just an idea of insulty people back in early Christianity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They believed that Mary was still able to menstruate when she gave birth. So Jesus and all of Christianity was polluted by her blood.
Oh. Hmm.
This insult
Hmm.
links kind of this idea that blood is something that is connected to femininity
Yeah.
and is something that is negative.
Right.
And so all the early Christians were like, nah, 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 nah. And they had long conversations. I feel uncomfortable even mentioning this topic, let alone the amount of time they spent arguing. Can you
Yeah.
imagine a bunch of men in a room? Because you know it was.
And they would never do something like that today.
A bunch of men in a room arguing.
About women's stuff.
If you have immaculate conception, do you still menstruate?
Oh my God.
What?
Good grief. Good grief.
This
How?
this brought to you by the same people who didn't help that lady who was bleeding for 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how
So,
weird though. How weird though, because you have this whole temple thing of you have to do the sacrifice, the blood sacrifice, right? So you would think, oh, blood is good. But then they turn around and, oh, yeah, but menstrual blood, not good.
well, it's just the age-old Christian argument of I'm right and you're wrong. Oh, what? Oh, what? I believe a new thing? I'm still right and you're still wrong, but I have a new reason for it.
Yeah.
right? I don't know what
Mhm.
I don't know what we want to call that, but in ye olde times they had that same equivalent.
Yeah,
Um,
but in Judaism, I mean, Jewish woman had to go to the ritual bath, right, after her period, right? Because you had to
yeah,
become purified from that blood.
yeah. Well, you have to. Well, purified maybe there are some ideas that people believed that you were the closest to God. If blood is the clay God uses to make human
Hmm.
beings, and women have access to this sacred material, and
Hmm.
then the idea was that in the same way that they separated people from the holiest places in the temple, maybe women being around their own blood somehow made them special. But then it switches. It
Hmm.
switches, right?
Yeah.
And the Christian church begins to believe that blood is the best thing ever, the best thing ever.
Okay.
And they start to think of themselves in strange ways, like that they are um, feeding off of the side wound of Christ. They're drinking the blood of Christ like it is the milk of a mother, was the
Yeah.
some of the metaphors that they would use.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and that um, getting your blood from communion and Christ then was a better way to get your blood than through circumcision. Right. So it
Oh.
starts to, so then the Christians now are on the defensive and are like, yeah, but the way you are around blood is bad and the way we're around blood is good. And all this fighting back and forth, back and forth, back and forth
About blood.
gets sort of linked to the language that happens in Germany, right? In the Holocaust. This idea
Mm.
of we, not we, as in you and me, let's make that clear, but that
Mhm,
the
mhm.
Nazis wanted to purify the bloodline.
Right, right,
They wanted the
right,
best, purest blood, and the way to do that was to get rid of the Jewish people. And so
right.
I there isn't really a clear argument about what we should do to like resolve these tensions about how we feel about blood. In this book, at least, that's kind of what I was hoping for. Like a, and here's what we should believe so we can all
Hmm.
get along again.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, but I, for me, what it pops up is like all of our fighting about blood. What does the blood of Christ mean? Has been the thing that divides denominations, right?
yeah.
We've, as Lutherans, we think what the communion is different than the Presbyterians and the Methodists and the Episcopalians and the
Oh,
Catholics.
yeah. Oh,
And we
yeah.
have agreements about how we can tolerate the ways that our feelings
That's
are slightly different about it.
mhm. And whether you can
Um,
do it online or not, and
yeah, right.
yeah,
And so we
yeah.
still have all of these divisions that we carry with us.
Mhm,
But what
mhm,
are the ways that um, that language isn't just innocent, right? Has led to very real wars, very
mhm,
real genocides and holocausts of
mhm,
people
mhm.
based on those differences. And so
Yeah.
it sort of is interesting to me, at least, that what they believed in the early church is radically different than what we believe now. But uh, what was wanted was to put down women
Mhm.
and to put down Jewish people.
Yeah, interesting.
So how can we still embrace our connection to God, our like I think the idea of having genealogy where you're a part of God's genealogy is really awesome,
Mhm,
right? But how can we embrace that language in a way that isn't seeking to um, be misogynistic
mhm.
or decrease the place of Jewish people in our world?
I've been had thought about this blood business before in terms of the communion liturgy and how I think for so many Christians, blood is tied to like blood of the lamb and washed in the blood and all that. There is a fountain filled with blood, that kind of language. And I remember John Shelby Spong saying or writing, I don't want to be washed in anybody's
Yeah.
blood, but how to get away from that kind of language that somehow Jesus, that Jesus died for our sins and, filled the fountain with blood or whatever it is. But I never realized, made the connection to what you're talking about. So this is a whole new aspect to the blood language.
Yeah, and part of that turning, part of that changing happens because there are so many martyrs
Mm,
that are killed for their faith. And so, this
mm,
idea of trying to reclaim and be associated with the blood very strongly sort of became a sense
mm.
of pride for those who were
Oh yeah. Oh.
maybe faced with no other alternative. So, maybe it's a trauma response in part
Mm,
that people are sort of claiming this. But again, this is another thing where, I mean, if 1215 is when this stuff came into place, it's another time when Christianity gets significantly grumpier in medieval time period around
mm,
that plague time, right? It
yeah.
gets significantly codified in its body fears,
Yeah.
and then the printing press is invented, and they can imagine that that's the oldest amount of time. But they were legitimately having conversations in the early church. Is baptism by blood or by water? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Moses
Yeah.
had it by blood and Jesus had it by water. And so, what is the proper initiation rite into this new group? And we haven't really continued those conversations. We sort of just accept the codified sacraments that we have.
Right.
But that's one of the things that I wonder. I love baptism. I think it's a beautiful symbol and a beautiful naming and a claiming.
Mm.
And I wonder, in this time and place, is it the best way to invite new people into a community, into a covenant, into a
Oh yeah.
way of being together?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I thought about this way back when I had people in my congregation who were not baptized yet. They came from another denomination that did not baptize children. So they had not been baptized, nor their son had not been baptized. And so they're in church every Sunday. And when it comes time for communion, everybody goes up to communion and they would stay there. And
Mm.
I mean, it was very obvious that, they weren't coming. And I thought, this is ridiculous. You have to this is crazy. So I said, you are welcome to come to the table because I just don't think Jesus would say, no, you can't come and eat. Forget it. Um, but I was thinking, oh boy, I could be in big trouble because you don't do that. You have to, because it used to be that we would say, those who are baptized and who believe in the real presence of the body and blood of Jesus are welcome to come to communion. All the rest of you stay there in your seat and eat worms. Right? But so I thought, oh boy, I could be in real trouble. And then I went to the churchwide assembly, and this was back in whenever the Concordat failed at churchwide assembly. What was it, 99 or something? Anyway, and I don't know if you know who Gordon Lathrop was, but he was like the liturgy sacrament guru
Mm-hmm.
that you did what he said or else. He was up there talking about I think it was the baptism, the means of grace document had just come out. So he's talking about communion, and I thought I heard him said because I wasn't paying attention real closely, but I thought I heard him say that sometimes it was okay for people to come to communion before they were baptized, and I thought, whoa. So
Wow.
I saw him in the hallway. I saw him in the hallway afterwards, and I never met the guy, but I thought, hey, Doctor, did I hear you say that? And he said, and he's very serious, right? He's very serious. He says, yes. Sometimes the way to the font is through the table.
Wow.
Yes.
Right. Uh,
So that says to me that baptism is not all. If I had asked these people, you got to be baptized, get them baptized so you can have communion, it didn't make sense,
I
right?
think the only reason I bring it up is because I think sometimes these sacraments become weapons against people.
Yeah,
And
right.
in my journey as an LGBTQ person, I have had people deny me communion before. I've also been in a situation where I have chosen not to take communion with groups of people because I was the only LGBTQ person allowed in the room, and others
Mm,
at the time were by policies of the church not allowed in the room.
mm,
And being someone who didn't take communion because they could physically see me, but not the people they had
mm.
prevented from entering the room felt like it was a part of a way to be the most present with them.
Mhm.
And like the woman who asked for the crumbs that the dogs eat at the end,
Right.
I would share crumbs after the meal.
Mm.
But I think that's just part of my curiosity, because we still see that happening here in San Francisco. It makes the news when our Catholic siblings discern that some people are allowed to have communion and some people are not allowed to have communion, and
Yeah.
why.
Right.
And so I'm curious about how we will find ways to remember that blood is a part of our life, our
Yeah.
sacredness,
Right.
and shouldn't be used in ways that deny our sacredness.
Yeah, we call
All
it
the other rules about
lifeblood.
Yeah,
Lifeblood,
all the other
right?
rules about who should take it and when, and
Yeah,
what
yeah,
is or is
absolutely.
not Jesus and what sort of substance, I'll let smarter people than me argue about. But the chaplain's heart inside of me wants people to be welcomed to the table that Jesus invited them to.
Yeah, right. Well, and it used to be that way back before my time even, that communion, remember when the altar was back against
Yeah.
the east wall, right? Because it was supposed to be representing an altar.
Hmm.
And communion was seen as the sacrifice, the sacrifices of God, right? This is what we were doing. And then it all shifted. And really, with the coming of the Lutheran Book of Worship, LBW, and that all of a sudden we're bringing the altars out from the back wall. And now we're gathering around the table. That's when we started calling it a table.
Hmm.
Really didn't call it a table before. And now it's like, uh-oh, wait a minute. If this is a table, then how could we be denying people to come to this meal? And we call it a
Hmm.
meal now
Hmm.
instead of a sacrifice.
Hmm.
How can we deny people this? So this is when this all starts shifting of who can come. And now we got little kids who can come, and everybody else. So that was a whole shift in the way we think about this blood sacrifice now becomes a meal.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important for us to learn histories like this, not necessarily because we believe we want to revert back to whatever was believed the oldest. I don't know that like oldest idea is the one that should always win, but
Mhm.
we should know, particularly like you and I who cared very deeply about
Mhm.
having interfaith conversations,
Yeah.
we should know what words wound our friends. And
Yeah, for
so
sure.
if knowing more about how conversations about blood through
Mhm.
history have been a part of anti-Semitism, it makes it easier for us to avoid some of those trigger words
That's right.
that might
Mm.
might speak words that were used to intentionally wound other people without our knowing about it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Oh man, a lot of stuff to think about here.
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about that subject, if you are interested in how ancient conversations about blood led to anti-Semitism, or some of the very kind of gendered anti femininity, anti gender nonconformity, uh,
Mhm.
you can check out this book, and I'll put a link below.
All right.
Well,
Sounds
talk to you
good.
next time, everybody.
All right. Bye.